So we have a number of things built into our Constitution and built into our governmental systems that would make it difficult for a fascist to really take roots here in our country. It's not saying they can't, but they would have to overcome some obstacles in order to do so. Uh, so when you look at possible reasons why fascism can happen here, uh, some scholars would argue that number one, our government is too large for one group or one person, and their supporting group to really take over completely. Our government is made up of bureaucracy. Bureaucracy are all the different agencies that kind of carry out the functions of our government. So when we talk about the Environmental Protection Agency or we talk about Homeland Security, those are all agencies. Well, they're completely staffed by civil servants, people who have gotten those jobs because of their expertise in those particular areas. And they've been working in those positions for 20, 30 years, and they don't care that much about politics, and they're trying to just do the best job that they can. And so even though your political appointees, when a new president comes in, they appoint the heads of all these departments and try to take the departments in certain ways, it's really difficult for them to get all of these civil servants who work in these departments to change the kind of work that they do, because they truly are the experts, and they've been doing that work for a really long time. And so in order for fascism to take root, is you've got to get every one of those people on board. And when you look at the size of our federal government alone, it's over 200 million employees. I'm sorry, not 200 million, 2 million employees that don't really care about politics. So they're just on the ground doing their job, and they're not really paying attention to the politics of it all. And so scholars would argue that our government is simply too big. And when we look historically of fascists who were able to take powers, those governments were pretty small. And so it was easy for them to replace people with people that were loyal to those fascists. And so it was much easier to do. We also have presidential term limits. So even if we were to elect a fascist as president, at some point, they're going to be termed out after 8 years, and they're not going to be president anymore. We're going to elect a new person in. We may elect another fascist in, but at that point, we generally would elect somebody else in. And fascists are based around personal characteristics, so it's really hard to continue to have fascists over and over and over again. Generally, it's one person. So built into our system right there is a way to get rid of somebody in that. Now, in order for a fascist to stay beyond their term limits of 8 years, they would have to get an amendment to the Constitution passed. And that is not an easy thing to do. You need 2/3 of the states or of the senators to recommend or come up with an amendment or a change to the Constitution. And in this case, it would be them coming up with a new rule that says presidents can stay for as long as they want. They aren't termed out. They can serve for more than 8 years. So you need 2/3 of the states to do that. Unbelievably difficult to get 2/3 of the states to do something like that. And then on top of it, once you've created the amendment, now to pass or ratify the amendment and make it law, you need 3/4 of the states to do that, which is even tougher to do. That's why we have so few amendments to our Constitution, because they're unbelievably tough to do. So a fascist who wants to come in and change that rule about presidential term limits through an amendment has a very, very small chance of ever getting that done. We also have a system built on checks and balances. If the president wants to declare war, he can't just do that. He can send troops in for a few days, but then he has to go to Congress, and Congress is the one who then actually declares war or even pays for the war. So if Congress doesn't want to go to war, they just simply don't pay for it or actually declare war. And then the president has to pull those troops back out. So we have all kinds of checks and balances built in. If a president starts to do things that seem to be illegal or against the Constitution, someone's going to file a lawsuit. And that lawsuit is going to go through the judicial branch. And the judicial branch is going to decide whether or not that action by that president is constitutional. And if it's not, then they're going to strike down that action and force the president to not do those things anymore. So we have all kinds of things built in to kind of prevent a president from doing those kinds of things. It's not to say that a president can't eventually get enough people put into positions in Congress or in the Supreme Court that will just be loyal to that president and do whatever they say, but that's a really tough thing to do. We also have a two-party system, right? We have basically Republicans and Democrats. And when you have that, you get one group in, let's say you get a Republican president, well, then the Democrats work hard to win the next election and work against the president and what they want to do. And that's how the system is kind of built. It's a system based on opposition. And so it's really difficult for one political party to hold on to power for a really long time because you have constantly the other party continually trying to work against it. And so it's very difficult to get rid of the other party or overpower them for any length of time. And so eventually you'll put a president in from the other party who most likely, once again, is not a fascist. And then with fascism, a lot of it is based on uniformity, and there's a certain population that is favored and other people are considered problems. And so in our country, we are becoming more and more diverse, not less diverse. And so you'd want to have a population that is very similar. And in our country, we are not becoming more similar. We're becoming more diverse. And so because the population is the one who votes and votes for these different political parties and votes for the presidency, we're kind of heading in a different direction than what would seem to allow for a fascist to kind of step in here. Now, not everybody votes, and it's hard to get people to go to the polls and things like that. And sometimes you put policies in place that make it hard for people to vote. And so we could probably do a better job in getting more people to come out and have their voice heard and vote. But at the same time, it's going to be very difficult for one leader to hold on to power for any real length of time, simply because we're becoming more diverse and more points of view rather than one narrow-minded single point of view based on one particular ethnicity or race or something like that. So lots of things in place that would really prevent a fascist from ever gaining a real foothold. It's not to say that they couldn't, or we wouldn't elect a fascist type of person, but we probably wouldn't be taken over in a totalitarian state as a result. We just have too many things in place.